of 2021. I'm Trish Long. I am the chairperson of the forum. And I see people are still coming in, so I'm not going to get started yet, but I do want to, I guess, give some housekeeping things. You all should be able to unmute yourselves if you need to. You can use the chat if you want to, but you're also welcome to unmute yourself and ask your question. But we are asking that for our presenter today, wait till the end to ask your question. And yeah, if you can, if you're able to, make sure it's nice to have your full name in the in the participants list, if you can do that. And then we're going to use that participant list for the attendance. And the attendance is how we know who is at the meeting for purposes of eligibility to vote. So I will get started with, I'm going to share the agenda and we can go through the items as we usually do here.
Also, just to make sure everybody is aware, we are recording the meeting, and then we'll put that video up on the web later.
Yeah, thanks, Andy. Okay, so can everyone see the agenda there?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. Again, welcome everyone. The first thing I'm going to run through is the announcement of the executive committee members and officers, which we may have done at the last meeting, but I think it's helpful to go through that now. Everyone should know Andy Rowan, he's our state GIO. And then I am Trish Long, I'm the federal rep. I work for the U.S. Department of Agriculture. Our education rep to the board is Dave Tulloch from Rutgers. Our county rep is Joe Smalley from Middlesex County. He's new. Welcome to the committee, Joe. State rep is Anne Marie Falkowski with New Jersey DEP. Our private rep is Kaylin Doherty from Civil Solutions. He's new to the board as well. Regional and NPO rep is Dom Elefante. He's new. Welcome, Don. New nonprofit rep is Mike Shanahan from the Nature Conservancy, and the surveyor's rep is Gary Veenstra from Neglia Engineering, and Gary is new to the board as well. And officers are me, the vice chair is Dom, the secretary is Joe. I think Andy is also considered an officer as the state GIO. So we're gonna. So that's just a review of those executive committee members and officers. The constituency group updates and task force reports are next. For those of you who don't know, we have 10 constituency groups. I just named the reps for all this. Oh, I missed one. The municipal rep. We have a vacancy at the municipal rep level. And our executive committee has been talking about this. And if anyone has thoughts on a municipality that might have a rep who could participate in the forum, please let me know. And if we don't hear from anyone, we will likely contact the county GIS coordinators for help with this. I know it's been a hard position to fill, but we do want to keep trying. I was a municipal rep at one time, and it is I'm glad to have served, and I think others, there are others out there, we just gotta invite them in. Let's see, the task force reports. Oh, sorry, I'm gonna actually ask Andy if you have anything to report.
Yes, I do. Some updates from our office. The Ortho Imagery acquisition is on track. We've been working with DEP on the client side of that. Products are due from them to us after the vendor, the QA vendor finishes, expected in late May. Then we have to move it around. It's a fairly large amount of data, and then we have to do our final review on that. So we're hoping to get that out for publication sometime probably mid-June, and that'll be through the channels that we have already established online. And Brian's going to provide an update on some of the changes there in just a second. We're also going to be rolling out an update on the statewide parcel composite around the end of this month. Now go out through the same channels there. And we've been doing a lot of work on our address points and road centerline data, quality improvements on the address point data, and we've also engaged Civil Solutions to do a big enhancement of that, to add in points that we're missing, primarily sub-addresses for multiple dwelling situations like apartment buildings. And we've also had a number of 911 operations at the local level recently getting in touch with us to get data from us, and we welcome that. And we also see those as a really important source of updates for us. So if any of you in local government get inquiries from your 911 staff about the availability of that data, please direct them to us. We'd love to work with them on that. And we have, as we've mentioned before, all of our relevant data there is in the NINA data format. So it should be readily usable in their software systems. That's what I have. Brian has some other things about our web presence. Brian?
Yeah, thanks, Andy. Good morning, everyone. Just some updates. Trish, if it's okay, I'm going to share my screen because I want to show a couple things real quick.
Okay.
So, morning, everyone. First, a few general reminders about the Geospatial Forum, right? So here's our website. Best way to stay in touch with us is to register and sign up. Make sure that you're signed up here. Most of you are already, but if you haven't done this, I would suggest you take a minute, go to the website, fill out this form, use an email address that's real, because the email is real critical. That's how we keep in touch with you. When you sign up, we do add you to the forum discussion email list. And if you want to elect to join a task force, you're also added to task force specific email lists. So real quick form, just fill it out, and then it all happens via email. You get an email with instructions to verify and such. If you're already a member and maybe you want to update your information, maybe you want to join a new task force or something, there's also just a little update link here. You put in the email address that you signed up with, and it'll send you a link and give you instructions on how to update it. Everything happens by email, very easy. No password to remember, just remember the email address that you used. So just a reminder on that. Also, other ways to keep in touch with what's going on in our community, right? We do have Twitter handles for the forum. Not sure if everybody realizes this. We do tweet our news announcements out. The handle is NJGF_info. So if you're on Twitter and that's useful for you, please be sure to go ahead and sign up and follow us there. And then the Office of GIS and Engine has one also, similar name, engine_info, and we post our announcements there. So a couple of ways to keep in touch with us. Some interesting numbers about the forum. Trish was mentioning the constituency groups. So as of December, this was the member breakdown. Sometimes it's just interesting to see this. A lot of private sector folks, a lot of state folks. The municipal sector, though, we said we're a little underrepresented there, and hopefully we can get somebody on the executive committee. And our attendance, it's interesting, you know, we went virtual I think June was our first virtual meeting, maybe, and our attendance is back up where it was pre-pandemic. So that's great. Glad that we're able to do this, continue to do this virtually. So switching over to Engine, right? Just a reminder, Engine is our data sharing site for the state. If you have vector data that you want to share, please hit us up. Just, you know, if you're not sure how to do that, just send an email to Engine or directly to me. I'll be happy to talk to you about it. We've got 500 plus vector data sets available in the Engine catalog. And that includes, we have a partnership with DEP where everything they post in their open data site is also accessible at Engine. So you can find it all in one place. So a couple of updates, just a reminder, you might have heard about these from Engine. We did take the statewide parcel data and release it as hosted services in ArcGIS Online. And we did that for performance reasons, really. The map service running on our servers was just taking a pounding. That's a good thing because people are using it, but it's a bad thing because our servers were you know, getting so much traffic. You know, John was worried they were going to melt on us. So we put the statewide parcels with the Mod 4 data as a hosted service in ArcGIS Online. We're calling it a beta release, but it's the same data you can download. Feel free to use it in your applications, use it in ArcMap, use it in Pro. It's available, and with the ArcGIS Online backend, it's very scalable for performance. So have at that. If you have any questions, just hit us up. Also, kind of a partner to that, right? So this is, if you're familiar with map services, this is a feature service, right? It's going to stream the vector data down to your client. We also did a cached tile layer of the parcels, which is just for rendering really fast with the parcel labels. So this can be handy if you're building like a web application or something and you just want to show the property boundaries with the labels, block and lot labels, and have it be fast. That's what this is for. So some folks will use both of these together if you're building a web application, and that can give you optimal performance. So again, you get to those from the Engine website, parcels page. They're over here. Right, you can also search our AGO site if you'd like to. So let's talk about imagery. We've had a number of imagery updates since our last meeting. We did release a couple new streaming services. So here on the imagery page, you can check out things you can stream and you can download. So let's talk about streaming first. 2019 NAPE is here as a web map service, web mapping service, WMS. Most of you are familiar how to use that. You know, NAPE is great. Leaf on from 2019. We also added a high altitude flight from the 1980s that covers the whole state. It's color infrared. If that's useful to you, you know, for historical comparison, that's available also. And then we did, for downloading, we did update the info warehouse to a more modern app. You can see this allows you to select, interactively select a number of tiles. 2015s, 2012s, 07s, and 1930s. The most popular ones that we get requests for, basically, and you can see the different formats here. You can also bulk download them, right? We're not doing hard drive distribution anymore. That stopped with COVID. But if you want to bulk download this stuff, you can do it from our storage bucket up in Amazon Web Services. And that's what these instructions allow you to do. You download their free command line tool, and we give you the exact syntax of what to type, and you can type it into your command prompt, and it'll just suck down the entire statewide, you know, catalog for that particular year. So really cool. You can do it anytime. You don't have to send us a hard drive. You don't have to wait for us to ship it back. You don't have to drive to Trenton. You can just download it. One note that has come to our attention since we did this upgrade recently is AutoCAD users have, there's an issue with AutoCAD where it won't read 4-band images, right? So our MG4s, of course, have all 4 bands in it. So for AutoCAD users, there's a couple of options there. You can use the 2015 Web Map service in AutoCAD. I've had a lot of users say they like that. Not sure that helps with printing though, if you have to print hard copies. So we are going to put, we're working on putting some instructions together, a little guidance on how to add the WMS to your AutoCAD session. So look for that. And then we also are going to make the 2015 MG3s available for bulk download for folks who need and want that. Look for that soon. We've got it up in AWS, and we've got download instructions that we're undergoing final testing and review, and they will be available on this page in the next several days. So this page again, right? Go to Engine, Enterprise Data, Imagery, and you'll get to this download section, and we will add a section here that we'll add it to here where you can download the MG3s. So we've had some folks asking for that, so that'll be available soon. And I think that's it. I think that's enough from me.
Okay, thanks, Brian. Let's see here. Next, I know that we have a report from, well, do we have any other, constituency group reports? Oh, actually, I know we have a task force report from Edith. Edith, are you ready?
So let me get some things turned on here.
Okay.
Okay. Now, share my screen has moved around again, and I'm having trouble finding it.
In mine, it's top right of the Teams window, Edith. It's a white up button by the big red leave button. That helps.
There you go.
Alrighty. So the task force hasn't been meeting, but I've got a few notes on what other people are doing that might be of interest to folks who are interested in the subject. The first is the surveyors and JSPLS is sponsoring a webinar next Wednesday on geodetic data transformations. You can register online or you can call them. There is a cost for this. Their speaker is someone who's very well known in the geodetic community, and it should be an interesting webinar on the nuts and bolts of doing data transformations, including to the new datums that are coming down the pike. Some news from the National Geodetic Survey. The schedule for the U.S. survey foot deprecation is being maintained. That is not being delayed. It's happening on December 31st, 2022. The National Register announcement has gone out last fall. They are going to continue support for the U.S. survey foot in existing products, but they are not going to add support for the U.S. survey foot into new products. Because of this overlap between the deprecation and the old datums, it's going to be very important when you're working with data to clearly specify in a way that everybody who sees that data will know which foot you're using if you're using feet. This is an editorial comment from me, not from NGS. Their timeline now for the adoption of the new datums is anticipated to be 2025. And if you want to keep track of where they are in the process, they have set up a web page with a lot of details as to exactly what they're doing, and when things are getting completed. We want to give a big shout out to the New Jersey DOT Geodetic Survey. This map shows the priority locations that the National Geodetic Survey needs to have reoccupied and measured so that they can create transforms between old datums and the 2022 datum that's coming out in 2025. As you can see, there are no priority items left for New Jersey because New Jersey DOT has been busy like little beavers going out and doing all these observations and processing them and getting them up onto the data store that NGS maintains. So great job. And because they've been so proactive, NGS is well along in doing the processing that they need to do to have stuff to plug in to the new transforms once the datums are ready. National Geodetic Survey also runs webinars, and they're pumping out quite a few of them on this topic. So the next one's April 8th. There's also a previous one in early March that they recorded that might be of interest to some folks who are interested in this topic. That's about it for now.
Okay, thank you, Edith. I know we have another report, Anne Marie from the state. Do you have something to share?
I do. Thank you. Good morning. I have a few announcements from the NJDEP. The 2015 hydrography update will be released soon. We don't have an exact date yet, but it is coming, so be on the lookout for that. The Bureau of GIS is in the process of reviewing the proposals received for updating the 2015 land use land cover to the 2020 Ortho imagery. And it is hoped that the proposal selection and the paperwork will be done so that we're ready to start the project as soon as we get the first delivery of the orthos. And this project is being jointly funded by NJDEP and NJDOT. I announced this last time in December, but it's still coming. The NJDEP map service URL changes because of a planned server migration. So anyone who's using our DEP data in ArcGIS Online or other applications will need to update their web maps and applications. And we don't have exact dates yet, but we're looking like early April. But we will be posting more information soon on our website and emailing it out to the forum. And registration is now open for the NJDEP GIS mapping contest. It will be held virtually this year on Thursday, April 15th from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. And this year we're asking everyone to register, whether you're submitting, voting, or attending the contest. The map registration closes March 26th, so that's next Friday. And this year we're doing things a little bit different. We're going to have all of the map entries displayed in an online gallery, and voting will occur before the contest. Our guest speakers include John Nelson, who's a cartographer and user experience designer at Esri, and Dave Rosenblatt, Chief Resilience Officer and Assistant Commissioner of Climate and Flood Resilience at NJDEP.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other constituency group reports or task force reports?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, who's that?
This is Roger Barlow with the Elevation Task Force.
Hi, Roger.
How you doing, Trish?
Good, good.
Just wanted to mention some quick items. The 3D Nation narrative that John Tarosky authored is out and available and gives a nice summation of elevation history and use cases for New Jersey. If people are interested in that, I'm happy to forward it to them. This will be part of the 3D Nation report when it's released in its finality this coming fall. The 3D Nation study is some of you participated in and collected a lot of financial and use case information on not just topographic topo elevation data, but topobathymetric elevation data. So we're hoping to include bathymetric data as part of the elevation portfolio for the nation. Item 2 is a completed half of a data set for the National Wildlife Federation, who funded this topography LiDAR in the northern New Jersey coast, is now databased on Digital Coast. It was flown by the Joint Airborne LiDAR Technical Center for Expertise, sometimes known as JOBLTEX, which is the Corps of Engineers, and is the most powerful topobathymetric LiDAR in the world. So see Digital Coast if you're interested in that data. To follow on with Edith's discussion on National Geodetic Survey, I wanted to mention that the next summit on vertical and horizontal positioning is May 4th and 5th, and you can go to the NOAA.gov website and go under National Geodetic Survey and find that. And finally, if anyone has topics for Elevation Task Force discussion, please send them to me, rbarlow@usgs.gov. And I didn't see John Tarosky on here, but if he's on, if he has any additional updates on some of the LiDAR derivative data sets, now's the time.
Yeah, I don't see him on. But thank you for your report, Roger.
Thank you.
Anyone else on the executive committee or task forces? Okay, okay, so now we open it up for questions about anything that you heard or announcements from anyone in the forum. Oh, okay, I see a hand there. Jason Seeley.
Yes, good morning, everybody. How are you doing today? Just really quick and announcements. I'm the president for Esri's Mid-Atlantic user group here in 2021. And I just want to bring to people's attention that on April the 22nd, we are going to be having a virtual event. And you can check it out on my LinkedIn for more information. And if you are interested in presenting something, please feel free to look that information up, because abstracts are due at close of business tomorrow if you would like to present something at that event. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other announcements? Yep, I see another hand there. Althea, you're up.
Good morning, everyone. I'm from St. Joseph's Health. I'm new to web mapping, and we're using ArcGIS Online. And we have a need to map data at the census tract level, but due to privacy concerns, we don't want to be using like third-party, external applications. So I was looking for recommendations from the group of where I can locate, I guess, applications that would perform this for us that we could purchase and bring in-house and do that in our database.
So Althea, I guess for people who have thoughts for you, should we email you?
That would be great.
Okay.
Yes.
And I guess, are you a member? I guess you're a member of the forum, so we can look up your email there, or you just?
Actually, I'm not sure if I've actually gone through the process of the registration. I need to do that, perhaps.
Well, you just want to give us your email now?
Yes, I can. So it's my last name, O-E-N, like Nancy, G-A, followed by my first initial A at sjhmc.org.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay. Thank you. Anyone else with any announcements or questions? All right. It looks like we're then ready for our scheduled speaker and presentation. I will introduce her. Her name is Jennie Karalewich, and she's with the U.S. Census Bureau. Her presentation is a geographic perspective of the 2020 Census and Redistricting Program. Jennie graduated from Penn State in 2005 with a BS in Geography. She also got her MS in Natural Resource Management in the Netherlands. Spent time in Poland and Ghana. And after graduate school, she joined the Census Bureau in 2008 and worked on geographic updates for the 2010 census. In 2015, she joined the Redistricting and Voting Rights Data Office as the geographic team lead for the 2020 Redistricting Data Program. We did have a speaker, David Craker, last year from the census, but this topic was different enough that we thought, and timely enough that we thought, and we heard that Jennie was a great speaker. So I'm looking forward to hearing from her. Jennie, you're up.
Thank you for the introduction, Trish. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. I'm going to share my screen. And I did this morning one last time and it clocked at 53 minutes. So
okay.
Get a cup of coffee, relax, and come with me on this journey. So can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Perfect. Yeah. So thank you for the introduction, Trish. I do have to give out a shout out to Webb Adams, who I used to work with at Census, in different branches as well, not just redistricting. So thanks for the recommendation. And I'm excited to be here today with you guys. So I'm just going to start. Move this on. And as Trish said in the beginning, we'll answer questions at the end. So I'm just going to pace through this. And like I said, come with me. So let me make this a slideshow. That would help. There we go. So right off the bat, why do we take a census? So the census is mandated by Article 1, Section 2 of the U.S. Constitution, and it takes place every 10 years. The first census we did was in 1790. And data collected by the decennial census determines the number of congressional seats each state has in the U.S. House of Representatives. That's the apportionment numbers that are coming out in April. We also use the data to allocate more than $675 billion in federal funds to state, counties, local governments to spend on schools, hospital, roads, public works, and other vital programs. So my presentation today, I'm going to go over 4 parts. The first part, I want to talk how we went from the 2010 census to the 2020 census. So it's going to be a higher level look at some of the improvements and innovations that the Census Bureau implemented. Then we're going to move into the Census Redistricting Data Program. Then we'll talk about how we created the 2020 geography from the census data. And part 4, since I'm presenting to a group of New Jerseyans, I wanted to take a deeper dive into the New Jersey geography. Full disclosure, you're going to see me take sips of tea during this presentation because it's 53 minutes is a long time. And I'm a Pittsburgh Penguins fan, and they are playing the Devils tonight. So whatever happens, don't hold that against me. I'm going to start. Okay, so when we're talking about the road to 2020, Census wanted to see what happened in 2010, what could we improve on, what could we innovate on, what can we make better? So they developed 4 areas, and I'm going to talk about them. The first is re-engineering our address canvassing process. We wanted to optimize our self-response strategies for people to respond to the census. We wanted to utilize administrative and third-party data, and we also wanted to re-engineer field operations. So we're talking about address canvassing. Picture it, 1790, 650 U.S. Marshals and their assistants took 9 months and visited every house in the U.S. and counted about 3.5 million residents. So to conduct the census, we need to know where people live and how to get there. And we do that through the address canvassing process. So from 1970 to 2010, our address canvassing process was sending people out on the streets to pound the pavement, walk the streets, and compare what they saw on the street to our address lists. Is that address still there? Does it need modified? Does it need deleted? Or does it need added? So after 2010, people started thinking, we have imagery, we have a lot of technology available for us. would it be possible to do some of this address canvassing using high quality imagery and a set of human eyes across the 11 million census blocks? And the answer is yes. So we had technicians review high quality imagery and geographic data to see if that block had any changes. I think of the block I grew up in high school. It had the same 5 houses on it. Nothing ever changed. So we were able to identify blocks like that as being stable and not necessarily requiring a person to go out and verify them in person. So when we went through this process of reviewing 11 million blocks, it was determined that 65% of them were stable. There weren't any changes to the address list. And 35% were followed up in the field with traditional in-field address canvassing. So moving on to optimizing self-response, I'm sure you guys are aware, but 2020 was the first time that you could take the census online, which is a huge improvement and a great innovation. So you received, 95% of us received an invitation to complete the census in our mailbox. And it said, "Dear resident, it's time to complete the census." We were given 3 options on how to do it. You could do it on the internet, you could do it over the phone, or you could request a paper form. So for us, 95%, we received that with a census identifier. For the other almost 5%, their invitations were dropped off in person to them. This was because they either have a PO mailbox where we can't that doesn't help us link the address and the census form, or the area recently had a natural disaster. And less than 1% of the households, a census taker came in person and conducted the census in person. These are mainly areas like remote Maine, remote Alaska, where we just wanted to go out and get the census taken care of. So again, we all received, most of us, 99% of us received an invitation to complete the census in one way or another. So the third aspect of moving towards 2020 is utilizing administrative and third-party data. So it kind of has an ominous tone to it, administrative and third-party data. However, this was just ways to improve these 4 areas. We used the data to improve the quality of our address lists. We used it to make updates as well as verify incoming data that we were receiving. We also used it to increase effectiveness of advertising and contact strategies. How do we contact that person? What language should the commercial be in? Should it be on radio? Should it be on TV? We had a whole team to figure that stuff out. We also used it to validate respondent submissions. So like I said in the slide before, when you received that invitation to do the census, you received a census ID. And if you logged on the internet, it would say, "What's your census ID?" If you didn't have it, you could still respond to the census, but we were like, "What's your address? Can you enter your address? Can you point it out on a map?" So when people had to go that path, the extra data was used to validate those submissions. And lastly, I'm not going to go too much into this, but the administrative and third-party data was used to reduce field workload for follow-up activities. We had to go out in the field and get census responses that were not turned in. So, okay, this is the last part of the road to 2020. I always said this was one of the drier slides, but this is what got us through 2020. You know, census in 2020 was under unprecedented circumstances. We had the COVID, we had civil unrest, we had hurricanes, we had fires. We had a lot going on. And the fact that we were able to re-engineer field operations to really streamline the office and staffing, increase the technology, and increase productivity really saved us and really saved the 2020 census. Lastly, this is not officially on the road to 2020. It's like a little exit, but I think it's really important to talk about. Within the Geography division, we ran a program called the Geographic Support System from 2013 to 2018. And the Census Geography division was successful at acquiring, evaluating, and incorporating current high-quality address and road data from over 1,400 partners. Like I said, beginning this, if we're conducting a census, we need to know where people live and how to get there. And this data aided in updating our records and making sure that we had the data that we needed. So for all the data that we acquired, it covered over 38,000 governmental entities, 88.8% of housing units, and 89% of the population accounted for in the American Community Survey. So it's a real good way of getting our data updated in preparation for 2020. So went over the high level census stuff, but now I'm going to start burrowing into redistricting and geographic topics. So voila, we have the Census Redistricting Data Program. So the Census Redistricting Data Program is governed by Public Law 94-171. So I have a lot of text on the screen, but I'm going to just break it down. Basically, this law instructed the Census Bureau to provide small geographic areas and the population counts for these areas to governments so they can perform their districting of building the districts that they need. Normally, we would be releasing the tabulations right now. However, with the circumstances of 2020, this has been delayed until September 30th of 2021. So I'm going to go over a short history of the data program. So I just want to touch on a lot of these topics to see where we've come from 1980 to 2020, where we are now. So 1980 was the first census that was conducted after the passage of PL 94-171. So we created census blocks, these small area geographies that we could give the population data for all incorporated places of 10,000 people or more, or for the 5 states that were covered by the Voting Rights Act, Georgia, Mississippi, New York, Rhode Island, and Virginia for statewide block coverage. So moving forward, getting in our time machine and going to 1990, this was the development of the TIGER system, the topologically integrated geographic encoded reference system. I don't even have that written down, I just know it. I hope I'd know it after 13 years of census. But this was our mapping system. This was also the first time we had nationwide block coverage and numbering for the blocks. This is the introduction of the Block Boundary Suggestion Project. You'll be hearing Block Boundary Suggestion Project a lot as we move along. And also, we delivered the data by compact disc. Moving on to 2000. So we accepted paper block submissions. We released equivalency files for voting districts, tabular data. And this is the implementation of the 1997 standards for the collection of federal data on race and ethnicity, which is Directive 15. Moving again, we're getting to 2020, I promise. For 2010, we accepted digital submissions via the Census Supplied Math Tiger partnership software called MTPS. We started continuously collecting state legislative districts. Before the 2010 census, Tiger actually went through a process of improving its accuracy called the Math Tiger Accuracy Improvement Project. So this was a way to get Tiger in better shape before the 2010 census. And since they were doing the Accuracy Improvement Project, we had to combine the Block Boundary Suggestion Project and Voting District into one phase. You're probably saying, Block Boundary Suggestion Project, Voting District, what's that? Well, we're going to talk about that. So here we are in the 2020 Census Redistricting Data Program. Again, from each decade, the program can change based on needs, innovations, stuff like that. So this decade, we had 5 phases. We started off with the Block Boundary Suggestion Project. We moved on to collecting voting districts, Voting District Project. Phase 3 is the data delivery, where we deliver geographic products, the small area geographies, and then the data tabulations, both referenced in Public Law 94-171. Then phase 4 is collecting congressional and state legislative districts, which we will start doing in January 2022, and it will go on throughout the decade. And phase 5 is a view from the states. That's our lessons learned document that we work with our liaisons to prepare what worked, what didn't, and what should we do for the 2030 census. So my presentation is really going to revolve around phase 1 and phase 2, which are the geographic update programs of the redistricting program, and phase 3, the data delivery. So I'm going to hop into phase 3 right now. And you can see geographic products, which we delivered to the states from January 19th to January 19th to February 12th, 2021. And then our dated delivery, which will be in September. So when we're talking about the geographic products, we have 4 types. We have shapefiles, we have PDF maps, we have block assignment files, and we have block-to-block relationship files. And they're all located at the links listed. So these are the types of shapefiles that we release as a part of the 2020 redistricting product, the geographic products. You can see when we're looking at this list, there's a lot of duplication between the state and the county level. However, this is for our users. If we have a state level user who wants to look at all the blocks in their state, we don't want them to have to merge all the counties into a state layer. That wouldn't work in a place like Georgia where there's 159 counties. And on the flip side, for the county-based, if there's a small jurisdiction, we want them to have that smaller geography to review rather than trying to extrapolate it from the state level. While I'm on the slide and I'm talking to geographers, I always like to give a shout out to the topological faces layer in the county-based shapefiles. This is basically all the faces within the county with all the geocodes, all the geography it belongs to. So you can build your own database with that layer. It's a really powerful shapefile that we release. So for moving on from the shapefiles, we also release the PDF maps and our tabular data. So you can see on the left is one of our PDF maps. They're a great resource to the states. They can see what's going on. We also have the block assignment file and name lookup tables that can be used in conjunction. So if you need to know all the blocks that are in Providence City, you would use the name lookup table that you see above, and it's highlighted in yellow saying the Providence City code is 59000. So when you go into the block assignment file, you would look at county sub 59000 and you would see all the blocks associated with that geography. I also mentioned the block relationship file. That's a way to have a crosswalk between the 2010 and 2020 blocks. So those are the geographic products. Now we're moving into the data tabulations. So we have 6 tables that we release as a part of the redistricting data. You can see them listed: race for the population 18 years and over, Hispanic or Latino and not Hispanic or Latino by race, Hispanic or Latino and not Hispanic or Latino by race for the population 18 and over, and the occupancy status. So for these 5 that I talked about, they're the same as 2010. The new table we have is the group quarters population by group quarters type. So group quarters are correctional institutions for adults, juvenile facilities, nursing homes, college and university student housing, military quarters, such as that. For tables P1, P2, P3, P4, and H1, all tables are produced at multiple geographies, including the census block, and group quarters is total population. So how do we get this data to our partners? So the official recipients who receive the geographic data and will receive the tabulations are our governors, the majority and minority legislative leadership in the senates and state senates and houses, redistricting commissions if established, and nonpartisan state liaisons. And how they'll get this data is via physical media, a DVD or flash drive. Just think, back in 1990, we were releasing data on CDs, so we're keeping up the trend. They'll be able to access the data at data.census.gov in an embargoed environment, meaning they'll be able to see it before it's released to the public. And we're definitely going to confirm that they've received the data, either by seeing that they've downloaded it through data.census.gov or mail tracking the packages and confirming with a phone call. So the next slide I have is brand new. This is something that happened this week. So there has been a lot of concern with the states about the data coming out September 30th, 2021. So we've decided that we're going to release a legacy format summary file. This is something we were already planning on doing, but we're basically going to produce the 2020 data and release it in the old format that we did since at least the 2000 census. It requires additional handling to extract the data from this format, but it's the same data that's going to be released on September 30th. The September 30th version will definitely be more user-friendly. And it's again, it's the same data that's on the DVD, but it doesn't have the help that the September 30th data will have. Additionally, we have prototype data from the 2018 end-to-end census test available. We leave that up there so states can begin designing and testing their redistricting systems. Okay, so we've taken the road to 2020. We've talked about the redistricting. Now we're going to get into the 2020 geography. So, talking to a geographic audience, I know you guys know this, but I always have to give it the shout out. So we have the MapTiger database, master address file, topologically integrated geographic encoding and referencing database. So this includes the 50 states, Puerto Rico, DC, where I'm at right now, as well as American Samoa, Commonwealth of the Northern Mariana Islands, Guam, and US Virgin Islands. And the features include polygon boundaries of geographic areas and features, linear features including roads, rivers, railroads, and point features. So this is an old slide, but a good slide, and I like sharing it. Again, I know you guys probably know this, but it's worth repeating. So basically, the MapTiger database is topologically integrated. So this means at the base of our database, we have edges. All of our features are based on edges. They're either the basis for roads or the border of a face. Edges are the skeletons, if you will, of the MapTiger database. Nodes are where the edges come together. You can kind of think of them as joints. And we have our vertices or shape files to show where edges change shape. So we have our edges, nodes, and vertices. We have the backbone of MapTiger. And built upon these edges and nodes, the enclosed area of the polygon, we call those our faces. So edges and faces, again, the skeleton. On top of the edges, we start building linear features. So roads, railroads, rivers. And also, this face may become a block depending on the surrounding geography, which we'll talk about later. Here's another representation. Again, I think it's a concise way of describing it. We have Fairview Avenue, and you can see to the left, we have a gray edge. That is the invisible edge that Fairview Avenue is built on. Fairview turns up and goes north, so it doesn't continue, but that edge is still there. And you can see where Fairview, I stay at Marriott's too much. I should just change the slide to Fairfield. I apologize. So we have Fairview Avenue, we have Route 100, and we also have a boundary between Fairview Township and Lee Township, all residing on this edge. So we have one feature, but it's all built on top of it. And one last view of this, you can see we have our edges, we have our voting districts in red, we have our incorporated place in gray, we have our county in yellow, and when we put it all together, we have our integrated layer. So I'm done beating the MapTiger horse. So MapTiger is made up of lots of boundaries. We have our legal boundaries, states, counties, townships in New Jersey, places, tribal areas. We have statistical, we have divisions, census county subdivisions, census designated places, tab blocks, what have you. The way I think of legal and statistical boundaries in my head is, I can tell you, I grew up in Forest Hills Borough in Allegheny County in Pennsylvania. I know my legal geography, but I couldn't begin to tell you the census tract, block group, tabulation block I grew up in. That's how it's a trick of the trade from my end. In addition to legal and statistical, we also have administrative boundaries. And this is where election areas, which you're going to hear about a lot for the next few slides, come into play, as well as school districts. So let's talk about census blocks. So again, census blocks are the building blocks for all geographic boundaries the Census Bureau tabulates every 10 years. Census blocks are the Legos. This is what we build upon. And it's the smallest level of geography you can get your basic demographic data for, such as age, sex, and race. And blocks will vary across the types of geographies. In a city, a census block will be a relatively compact area where it's road, 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 road. In suburban or rural areas, it might be a larger area that's bound by a road, a stream, a property line, and another road. In remote areas, census blocks may be hundreds of square miles. They can be really huge. So to kind of go over what census blocks are not, like I said, they're not delineated based on population, because you can have remote areas in Alaska, out west, where there's no population and the block is huge. Census blocks are not permanent through the decade, meaning they can be split when a change in another geographic boundary occurs, such as an incorporated place annexation. They have 2 blocks, one's in the incorporated place, and they need to add to the incorporated place, but not the entire census block. So they have to split it and then begin a special coding for that. Census blocks can't really be used with ACS data, the American Community Survey, because ACS only goes to the block group level. So I've been promising this for a while. We have the Block Boundary Suggestion Project. This is phase 1 of the Redistricting Data Program, the first of our geographic update cycles. So we had 2 parts to it. In January 2016, we mailed out our data to the states. They made their updates and returned it to us in May. And then in 2017, we mailed the data out again and said, hey, we implemented what you said. Can you take a look? Did we get it right? Do you have more updates you'd like to do? So that was the verification cycle. So the main part of BBSP, what we like to call Block Boundary Suggestion Project, is that users could flag edges that should be held or not held as the 2010 census block boundaries. Basically, we gave them the data and we're like, build your own Legos, or at least have some say in what your Legos should look like. So on the image to the right, I know it's a bit small, I apologize. You can see we have features with highlights on them. So if you look at the 2 polygons with the red highlight, they're retention ponds. And the participants like, no, we don't want this pond to be a block unto itself. There's no population there, it's a body of water. So you can see with the red highlight, they said, do not hold this block as a census block boundary. We do not want this. However, you can see the roads are highlighted in blue, and they said, we want this to be our census block. This is a good boundary. This will help us with our Legos and building our geography that we need for redistricting. So that was the meat of the project. In addition to these updates, users could also make boundary corrections and annexations to features such as places or townships. They could add, delete, or modify linear features. We were missing a subdivision that was built in 2018, or they need a line to create, they need a census block boundary, and we don't have an edge that meets it. So they could draw in that edge and flag it as a must hold. They could also add, delete, or modify area features such as parks, college campuses, and jails. So we should take a minute on how we create census blocks. So we have an algorithm. So we have all the edges within a county, and this algorithm assigns edge values to each edge, and it's a hierarchy. So boundaries, places, townships, states, counties, must holds for the Block Boundary Suggestion Project have the highest value, and they will be held as block boundaries. So primary roads, interstates, state highways have a high value as well, meaning they'll most likely be held as a block boundary. Then it goes down to named neighborhood roads, unnamed neighborhood roads, roads, power lines, and visible edges. It's just a way of organizing the edges that we have to see how these blocks should look. So to aid in this, I think this is a really cool innovation. We created the prototype block file. Again, this was new, and we created them from 2016 to 2019 as a part of the Tiger Line shapefiles. And what we did was we took that county and we ran the block algorithm on that county on all its edges as it was. So it would give the user an idea, if we'd had the census today, this is what your census blocks would look like. So this really allowed states to target their block boundary updates using the must hold and do not hold flags. And this is an example from Huntington County, New Jersey in 2019. So when we had participants saying, this is what I want my block boundaries to look at. We did some quality control. We didn't give them full control. You know, we want to make sure that we're putting good data in. The first thing we did was making sure if you were flagging an edge as a must hold to be a block boundary, you know, block boundary, yes, it should connect and form a polygon. So you can see in this image, the user selected Hard Rock Road as a must hold, but we went, hey, that's a must hold, but it's not connecting to another edge that's being held as a block boundary. So flagging this edge as a block boundary is not going to do anything because there's nothing to connect to it. So you either got to remove it from Hard Rock Road or continue it onto Hard Rock Road or the unnamed road to the left. We also checked that do not hold flags were valid. So even though we wanted our users to have input on their census blocks, boundaries were going to be held no matter what. Interstates were going to be held as block boundaries no matter what. So we did have to do some review and cleanup. We also did a block boundary review right at the end of summer of 2020 before we delineated the census blocks. So a lot of data is being updated in MapTiger from 2016 to 2020. Everybody is trying to get their data in before the blocks are delineated. So, and things change. We might have had a user flag a small frontage road as a must hold for their census blocks in 2016. They're like, we need this block to be we need this block. However, by the time 2020 came around, the incorporated place boundary nearby was now 10 feet away from the edge that we had held as a must hold. We wouldn't want to hold both edges because the place is going to be held as a block boundary and the must hold would be. So we went in and found these very small areas to review to see if we should remove the must hold because the nearby feature would be held as a block boundary. We had strong standards for this. It wasn't willy-nilly, but we did a review to make sure we were not creating small blocks with no population. So I mentioned we had block boundary suggestion program. The second part of the geographic updates for the redistricting program were the voting districts. So we ran the voting district project from January 2018, basically with 3 cycles until March 2020. So voting districts are a very important geography for redistricting. However, it's not a geography that we maintain in the MapTiger database. They change a lot. They're not a legal or statistical boundary that we use. So we put them in this year in 2018 through 2020, sorry. And then we're going to take them right back out. But we wanted to get them in there so that they could be part of the block boundary creation process. So when users inserted them starting in 2018, we put them in, we sent them back to the state so they could verify in 2019. Like I said, voting districts can change rather quickly. So we wanted to have these 3 phases to make sure we were getting the most up-to-date and most correct voting district representation. So you might be like, wow, 2 verification phases, but we really wanted to get them in and get them in right. In addition to voting districts, again, like you could continue making block boundary flagging suggestions, boundary corrections and annexations, and you could add, delete, or modify your roads or area features. So, like our block boundary QC, we did voting district QC. So voting districts, you had to have wall-to-wall coverage within the county for voting districts. You couldn't have unassigned areas. We also checked for spatial and attribute overlaps. You couldn't have a face that was in 2 voting districts, and you couldn't have the same attributes for multiple voting districts in terms of attributes. You could have voting district 1 that might be discontiguous, but you couldn't have 4 voting district 1s. We also checked for small area VTDs, and the image on the right you can see, I know it's tiny, I apologize. In the upper left corner, there's a little green voting district within a cul-de-sac in the middle of baseball fields. So when we saw this, we were like, we should probably reach out to the participant and see if this is what they wanted. And they didn't. So we removed that. But with these changes that we made, we always were sure to reach out to the participant and get buy-in on it and make sure we weren't removing something that was intentional and served a purpose. So block QC, voting district QC, we also did general feature QC because they could make updates. We made sure that the adds, deletes, modify linear and aerial features were appropriate. For example, someone might add a area feature for a cemetery and name it cemetery. We didn't want to do that because we had the code for a cemetery, so we'd remove that. Or in the example with the clover leaves on the left, you see, we have two state highways coming together, and the participant added edges down the medians and flagged them as must holds. So this would create a lot of little blocks with no population in a small area. So we worked with the participant to represent what they needed, but removing those add lines. And then on the right, you can see these are real examples and people remain nameless. But this participant was really trying to improve our data, and where we had the current roads, they're in red, and he flagged them for deletion and then drew them in several feet over in green to reshape them. And again, we appreciated the effort, but we did not make those updates because the current roads fit within our spatial standard. And we also ensured that duplicate features were not being added. So, like I said, I'd be remiss if I said redistricting was making all the updates for 2020. There were several other ongoing operations. We have the Boundary and Annexation Survey, the BAS, which is the official program for updating legal boundaries. And in fact, when we received updates to place boundaries, township annexations, we gave them to the BAS team to adjudicate. We're like, this is your bread and butter. Please review and let us know. We also perform the local update of census addresses, Lookup, and then the subsequent operation of new construction. And this offered the opportunity to governments to review and comment on the residential address list for their jurisdiction before 2020 to make sure we were getting the most up-to-date data. We also did Participant Statistical Areas Program, PSAP, where participants were invited to review selected statistical area boundaries. So again, like census designated places, block groups, tracts, and lastly, school district updates. Goes without saying, they review the school district boundaries. So internally, our office, when we were receiving the voting district files, we were like, is there something we can do to make sure that we are not making a mess of boundaries and blocks? So we came up with the slivers. So Sliver Check look for slivers, which are small blocks created when voting district boundaries and nearby legal boundaries or highways did not align. They're generally small in area, they don't have population. If they weren't resolved, they would become census blocks. And we tried to clean them up where we could. However, they're unavoidable in some circumstances. So here's a good example of a sliver. So this picture is nice and big. I'm saving your eyes for this, this one slide. So you can see the brown area is a VTD. There's gray area shadowing the VTD, which are incorporated place boundaries. You can see we're in a very rural area that looks like there's a farm there. So the VTD boundaries submitted to us followed the road. When we put them in, we saw the ink place boundaries were a little offset the road, probably about 20 feet along the property lines. So if we put this in as is, there was a potential for 4 census blocks. We'd have the VTD, which is valid, but we'd create blocks, at least 3, where the difference between the VTD and ink place were. And again, they would be small area, 0 population. So we reviewed these on a case-by-case basis. If you want war stories, you can talk to Webb. And in this case, we were like, let's move the VTD boundary to match the ink place boundary. Let's avoid creating those small blocks. Let's align these geographies. It's not affecting the voting districts. We're not the BAS team, so we can't move the ink place boundaries, but we can move to meet the ink place. We feel comfortable, and we would check with the participants. So internally in our office, we did slivers. But we did a geography-wide operation like that this summer in 2020. We were no longer accepting updates to the MapTiger database, so we locked it down, and the Geographic Area Reconciliation Project happened, where all the subject matter experts came together and identified boundary and feature discrepancies between all the updates. And we reached out to participants on what we could fix or not fix before the creation of the 2020 blocks and release of the data. So these are all real examples. It's like taking a trip down memory lane. So on this first example on the left, you can see, again, it looks like there's a highway going from the bottom left to the top right. You can actually see cars. And if you look closely, we have VTD 02, 06, 04. And if you looked at the imagery, it's about the size of a car. When we came across this, we're like, there's something not right. You know, there's something wrong here. So GARP alerted us to this. We reached out to the participant, and turns out it was a fragment of the shapefile they supplied us. So we were able to remove that VTD and add that area to the 02, 06, 02 VTD. The top right, we had the VTD in green, and a little piece of it got added to an area between an on-ramp and a highway lane. It's highlighted in blue. So again, we were alerted to this, like, hey, we should fix this. And again, you might be seeing these and you're like, wow, she talked about doing a small area review. We did when we inserted things in the submission before it got inserted to Tiger. So some things can happen in Tiger with a lot of people touching it. So this is a follow-up review. And the picture to the bottom right, I still dream of these. You can see an area, the place boundaries in red, the block group is in blue. It was like, can we resolve these two? So again, we really wanted to get the best geography that we could before we created the 2020 blocks. So here's the reveal, the national census block count from 1990 to 2020. So 2020 with almost 8.2 million census blocks, which is a decrease from 2010. And some people said, I don't feel comfortable that there's 3 million less blocks in 2020 than 2010. But I think a lot of the efforts that we just talked about in reviewing areas before we created the blocks resulted in the reduction of blocks. Part 4, a deeper dive into New Jersey geography, what you've all been waiting for. So be patient. I've learned my counties, and I hope I don't screw them up. So before I start, I always like to share what I'm looking at. So I'm using the 2020 redistricting data shapefiles, and I looked at the townships, the primary and secondary roads, census blocks, and voting districts. And you can see for townships and census blocks, there's 2 versions with 10 and 20. As a part of the redistricting shapefiles, we included the version from 2010 as well as the new 2020 version, which helped for easy comparison, as you'll see on some of these slides. And again, you can access the data at the link below. So one last reminder before we begin looking at stuff. We've talked about MapTiger a lot, and it goes with reminding that all boundaries and feature in MapTiger are on edges, but not all edges are block boundaries. Polygon features in MapTiger are built on faces, but not all faces are blocks. Okay, said my piece. So this slide is rather boring. There's going to be a nicer slide next, but just to give a breakdown of New Jersey. So in 2010, you had almost 170,000 census blocks. In 2020, it was almost 140,000. There was a reduction of about 32,000 blocks. And all counties saw a reduction of blocks from 2010 to 2020. Here we go. I'm always excited when I can make a nice chloropleth map. I don't get to do that very often. So I made a series of them, and this is just basically the number of blocks in 2010. You can see that Atlantic County had the highest number of blocks, 16,067, and Bergen County and Monmouth have high counts as well. When we look at 2020, you can see Bergen, I had a friend with Bergman as the last time growing up, Bergen, Monmouth, and Atlantic still have the most blocks, but it's not as high as it was before. And when we look at the change between 2010 and 2020, Monmouth, Atlantic had the really high numbers of reduction in blocks. So I was like, okay, I'm a geographer. How can I explain this? What should I look for? Like, how did this happen? So the first thing I thought of doing was, let's take a look at block boundary flagging from BBSP through VTD. So all counties in New Jersey that were submitted by the state to us had block boundary suggestions. In the end, 5,703 must holds were accepted and 5,622 do not holds were accepted. So the must holds are in blue, the do not holds are in pink, and the black are the county boundaries. So I'm looking at this, I'm not really seeing too much. When I compare it to the change of the number of blocks, still there isn't a geographic trend that I can say or a direct correlation, but you can see that the county the county with the most must hold and do not hold flags, I'm blanking on the name, had a reduction of blocks, but also Cape May County, which had a lot of must holds, didn't have the higher number of the reduction in census blocks. So I'm not prepared to make any conclusions on this, but I think it's pretty neat to see where the updates were and how the blocks were affected. So just off the base, the state level, there were 6,345 voting districts in 2010. And in 2020, there were 6,362. It's a pretty stable voting district count. 5 VTDs in New Jersey were coded as ZZZ, ZZZ, which are unpopulated areas. We're usually hesitant to accept these unclassified voting districts, but you can see they are over the ocean and going up the coast. I don't have my mouse, I'd show you, but it's kind of from the tip of the J up to the top along the ocean. You can see the 5 ZZZZZs. And in New Jersey, I will never say always, but VTDs generally nest within townships. So I'm going to go through some examples. So in 2010, this is tabulation blocks in Salem and Cumberland counties along the Delaware Bay. And you can see over the water, there are a lot of tabulation blocks out there. However, there's no population over the water. So when we look at 2020 in green, you can see we were able to do a lot of cleanup with all the geographic programs and review that we did. This was probably cleaned up the most by GARP, the Geographic Area Reconciliation Program. But you can tell when we see cleanup like this, you can see why there was a decrease of 3 million blocks nationwide. We were able to get blocks where we needed, not where we didn't. Here's another example in Morris County. The red outlines are tabulation blocks. And in this community, you can see the 2 arrows. So the arrow at the bottom left, a block was created in the parking lot around a little median. So that was a part of the census blocks. And in the upper right, you can see that 2 lanes entering this community were held as tabulation blocks. Tabulation block. When we look at 2020, you can see those 2 areas were cleaned up and no longer created as tabulation blocks. You can see them compared. So I'm going to take a step away from blocks for a little bit and go back to my geographic update roots and take a look at some roads. So this is I-287 in Bergen County. And in 2010, you can see there was dual lanes where the arrow is, and then it's condensed into a single lane representation. In 2020, you can see we were able to get the updates made to make the representation a dual carriageway more accurate. Here's another example in Middlesex County on the left. The red was the original 2010 representation of US Highway 130. And in 2020 in green, you can see we were able to do the double lane representation. And then on the right for State Route 35 in Monmouth County, you can see in red, the road initially looked like that. However, it's changed over the decade and we were able to have the correct representation in green and the new intersection. The ramps aren't shown because they're not a part of this data set. We're not ignoring them. Taking it back to VTDs, you can see on the left here, we have a red township boundary and a gray VTD boundary in Sussex County, and they're not aligned. And then in 2020, you can see the township boundary in green and the VTD boundary in black are aligned. So again, this is making sure that our boundaries are aligning and we're not creating these small sliver blocks or small non-population blocks. We want things to align. And the last example of this presentation that I'm going to go over is a great example in my mind. So this is the same area. It's both in 2020, but I have one with imagery and one without to show. So the green features are roads. The black feature is actually an invisible edge that was flagged as a must hold. So you can see that the participants like, I need these edges that are in black to create the tabulation blocks I need for my redistricting. So when you look on the right without the imagery, it's easier to see that those must holds that were added are block boundary suggestions, and they couldn't have been, the roads represented couldn't have been used. It had to be represented that way. And they were able to create their blocks that they needed using it. So it's been a journey, and I have to end with this. That's an actual picture of me at the White House when I was little in my New Jersey Devils jacket. So I hope, you won't hold my Penguins fandom against me. So I'm going to escape that and stop sharing my screen.
Okay. Thank you, Jennie. I'm not sure what I'm echoing.
I'm going to go on mute. It's probably me.
Yeah, okay, that's it. All right. Yeah, thank you for your presentation. I love the detailed examples you gave. And I have to say there have been many times when I wanted to, I remember the green and the red road example where the guy moved it. There have been many times when I've been wanting to move those census roads. But I know there have been some questions in the chat about from earlier in the meeting, but the floor is open to anyone who has questions about Jennie's presentation. Actually, I have one. What did the VTD? What did that stand for again? Was it voting?
It's a voting district
And
project. There's
oh,
no T, but we needed an extra letter.
okay.
I always thought they were voting tabulation districts.
That is true. We have used that wording in the past.
Okay.
So this is Andy. I wanted to add a couple of comments here that came to mind as you were presenting related to our continuing efforts to work with Census Bureau about getting our data in sync. So those of us in New Jersey that have worked with census data and the New Jersey state municipal boundaries in our data are not exactly the same as they are in Tiger. And now you can sort of see why Census Bureau builds their stuff up topologically. And so where they have a different representation of a road or a water feature, our boundaries along where those features coincide with a municipal boundary, our data doesn't necessarily coincide with theirs. We were able through the BCARP, Jennie can help me with what all that stands for, BQ Boundary Equality.
Assessment and Reconciliation Project.
That one, yeah. We were able to get in the places where the municipal boundary is formed by an edge that doesn't coincide with a road or a water feature, we were able to bring them into alignment, which solved a lot of the really more significant differences between the data sets. So example, in that screenshot from Sussex County where the municipal boundary was just a line through the middle of the forest, the census line in some cases was significantly different from the state one. And we were able to document for them that ours was better, and they moved theirs. So what remains now are the ones where the boundary does coincide with a physical feature, and we weren't able to catch those because of the timing in the Census Bureau's 10-year process. We were too late to get the roads and water features changed to move everything. But we haven't given up. So hopefully by the next census, or maybe somewhere in between, we can have our municipal boundaries and the Census Bureau ones more or less identical. Because, you know, that's an ongoing issue if you're doing, well, for example, the DEP has their new environmental justice law, which is based on census data. And so we had to do some fancy footwork to find the affected areas and represent them in the data that DEP uses typically. And then the other thing that I wanted to mention, just because it kind of passed without being noticed, the discussion about voting districts reminded me of this. The Division of Elections and Department of State has totally rewritten the statewide voter registration system. The old one was all of the determination of which district a voter was in was all based on a tabular lookup, and it had no geographic awareness, which meant that redrawing those was a huge amount of work. And voting districts in New Jersey change on a pretty regular basis because they're required by statute to fall within a range of values for the number of active voters that are in each precinct. And so if the population changes, or even if the voting activity changes, they can be required to either split a voting precinct or combine them to keep them within that range of voters. And that's really driven by a desire for the efficient use of the voting machines, but also not to have too much waiting time for people to vote. So over the last couple of years, the state has rewritten the voting system, and now the new one uses GIS internally within the system. So all the voter addresses have been geocoded, and all of the various polygons, the voting districts, the legislative districts, the wards, the congressional districts, those are all represented in GIS in the system, which is great news for the people that have to redraw all those boundaries. So the big redistricting is going to be happening for legislative and congressional districts, but then it also, the ongoing work on the voting districts is also facilitated by this. So it's really a huge change in their world. And you know, we were helping them behind the scenes, but the actual rollout happened this year, or actually, sorry, last year. Kind of lost in all of the other news that was happening about election-related things, but they did manage to get that out, and it's in use now, which is really pretty cool progress. We have a fully geo-enabled election system now.
That is really exciting to hear about. And I will say that trend seems to be the popular trend, where states are moving away from the tabular equivalency files and stuff to a more GIS source when they're creating it. So it's good to hear that.
Okay, yeah, I did not realize that that was going on at all, Andy. Very interesting. All right, I don't know, any other questions from anyone for Jenny or any of the topics that were covered in the meeting today? If there are none, yeah, like I said, there were some comments in the chat. Glad to see those, and hopefully people will get answers to those questions if they haven't already. All right, I think that is it. Thank you, Jenny, for your time.
Good night. Can I say something real quick?
Yeah, yep.
If after you're eating dinner tonight, you're in the shower tomorrow and you're like, I have a question, feel free to email my office at RDO, as in Redistricting Data Office, at census.gov, and we'll get back in touch with you.
Okay.
And
Great.
thank you for inviting me. I had a really good time. I hope I didn't bore you guys, but I wanted to take you on that journey with me.
Well, it's fascinating to see all the work that goes into that, and I'm sure bits and pieces will remain with people who have been doing similar work. So thank you. All right, that is it. Our next meeting is when is it? June 3rd. For those who are interested in that, we'll be announcing the topic for that meeting through email, and yeah, that's all I've got. Thank you everyone for attending today, and have a good day.
Thanks, Trish.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.